I'm sorry that it took so long to get started. Get the class started. I had to go and get the IP address changed. It's the same IP address you guys used in the last lab class, if you remember, for those of you who were here. In that class, what we did is we created this MySQL account, Spring 2018 Java, and I'm still connecting to the computer, the 11th floor lab 3. So from here, from this computer, I'm connecting over there to access those databases that are on that computer. So if I say show databases, I see that there is this student DB, and we can say use student DB and then show tables to see what tables are there. So I created one of these tables, and maybe some of you guys created the other ones, and we can say select star from student to see what are the records available over here. So as you can see that probably I have inserted 2 rows, the first 2, and then some other student inserted some other rows. Okay. In the other table, student 1, student 2, test 37, maybe there will be other entries as well. Okay. So in today's class, what I'm trying to do is, instead of using this client, this MySQL client, we're going to write a Java program that does the same thing, that connects to this remote database, is able to insert data or retrieve data. First of all, we'll do it in the console application, and then we will hook it up with a graphical user interface. Okay. We don't have very many classes left though, so maybe I will show you the console application today, and the graphical user interface will do that on Saturday's class. After that, the exams are going to start. We'll probably have a lab class on Monday. So that's the only thing, right? 23rd. So 19 is today, 21st we'll have a class, and 23rd we'll have a class. And after that, the exams are starting, so I won't be able to have any more classes. Alright, so let us get to the point. I will create a new project. It's going to be a plain Java application, because I want to concentrate only on how to communicate with the database right now. Now we can look at the user interface, the fancy stuff, later on. So this is our database console application. We need to write some code that would let us connect to this database. Now, before I get started, this is our main method, and from here, what I want to do first is, see, this one has a signature public static void main. So all the methods that I'm going to call from this method, they have to be static as well, and sometimes that can be an issue. We talked about static methods before, that static methods, you can call them just by using the class name. It's a property of the class. It's not a property of the objects. It gets shared by everyone. So with this static method, if I wanted to call, let me just give you a brief demo. Public void sum method, which does nothing, right? So if I wanted to call this sum method, I can't, because this sum method also needs to be static, because a static method can only call another static method, and sometimes it's going to be an issue. I mean, right now maybe not so much of an issue, but if you have a class that has other methods, you can't really call that from main, because they need to be static as well, because main is static. So in order to avoid that thing, what I'm going to do instead is I'll just create an instance of this class and then run that. How do we create an instance of this class? The name of this class is DB console application, we can create an object of it like A, B, C, or whatever name you give that, right? That's just declaring this object. It doesn't really instantiate it. It doesn't really create that. You're only reserving a name for this and nothing more. The memory doesn't get allocated. It gets allocated only when you say new DB console application. This is what we call instance, right? With the new keyword. That's when everything happens. And that also calls what? What is this thing? What's this part? Anyone? Someone? Oh, we don't know the name of this thing? Okay, if we don't know the name, then I need to write it down in all caps. This is the constructor. Okay. So when we instantiate something, we basically call the constructor, and whatever is in the constructor gets executed right from there. So just to show you that we can say hello world. Okay, so it works. Now today's task is nothing about hello world, but I just wanted to get things in place. There are a few things we need to do right now. We need to connect to this database, that's one part. We need to retrieve data, maybe we will insert data as well. So whatever queries we were writing with SQL, we'll be writing that inside our Java code so that they get executed right over there on the database management system. So first of all, I need you guys to realize what are the things you're doing when you bring up this black window to connect to the database by yourself. See, we're executing this MySQL command. What are the things we're passing? We're passing the host name, the username, and also the password. Right now, this is hidden, but when you write it in your Java code, it cannot be hidden. It has to be a part of your code, or it has to be read from somewhere. Maybe you'll give a graphical user interface where the user is going to provide the username and password. You take these things and then you pass those values over there. So somehow you need to know the username and the password, okay? And also where to connect. So all these things, let us write down, because this is going to be a console application. This is not a graphical user interface, so we have to have those things available. And I'll just write it in here, private string username. All right, what's the username? Spring 2018 Java. That's the username. Okay, so I'm writing them inside the code just to keep things simple, but it doesn't mean that they have to be within this code. Even for a console application, you can ask for input from the user and then use scanner.nextString or something as such to read it from the user, or you can save it in a file and read it from there. There are many different options. Okay, so to keep the matters very simple, I'll just write them over here, and the only way to change this thing is to come to the code. So let me also say public final string. Final means that they're going to be constant, they're not changing. In C++, we write const, const for constant. In Java, we write final to say they're constant. What's the password? Password is simply Java. What's the name of the host or the IP address of the host? it's written right here, 172.17.10.52. 172.17.10.52. Okay, so these are the very basic things. And one more thing, it's quite important as well. The actual name of the database, because as you can see that the same database management system can host multiple databases. So just this one, when we say show databases, we have connected to that computer. You see that there are two different databases. And when we were looking at the demonstration in the lab, there were like 137 or 138 such databases in that one computer. Okay, so there can be multiple databases. You need to be able to say which one you're going to use. And for us, this is going to be the student DB. So just by declaring these names, it's not going to be enough, right? We have declared these things, but we haven't connected to the database. Now, in order to connect to the database, what you need is a database URL. Do we know what URL stand for? Or what a URL is, even if you don't know the elaboration of it? This is Uniform Resource Locator, and for us common people, this is just a link or a website. But I mean, that's not the correct term to use. URL is the correct one, Uniform Resource Locator. So just to give you an example, if you open up your browser and you just say go to www.google.com, all right, when you go there, this entire thing starting from H all the way to M, https://www.google.com, this entire thing is the URL. That points to a resource that you can get some service from here. If you go to this site, you'll get some information. Whether it's about searching, or if you go to my.acu.ac.bd, you get to see your grades, or you can do your self-advising. Things can be different, but those are resources available on the internet. And this thing, HTTPS, that's what. That's Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. The last S stands for secure. Again, the elaboration is not so much important. It's more important to understand that that's a protocol. That's a set of rules that lets you talk. This browser is talking to Google server to get your information. Right? Do we always use HTTPS or HTTP? No, there are many other protocols. Like one common protocol can be FTP. For those of you who are using broadband at home, I mean, you'll see that your service provider may have some FTP server where they have uploaded a lot of movies or dramas and stuff. So you can use your browser, type FTP : and then the IP address of that particular thing. Then you can go there, download your movies and other stuff. Okay, so these are the protocols that you write over here. So why am I talking about these things? Because this is a part of the URL. And the URL that we're going to write right now also has something as such. When you're trying to communicate from your Java code to the database, you have to give the URL. And let me show you what a URL in database form looks like. We'd say JDBC, this is for Java database connectivity, colon MySQL, because Java's database connectivity system, it can communicate with many different database management systems. It can be MySQL, it can be Oracle, it can be SQL Server. There can be many different options, right? So at the protocol level, JDBC colon MySQL colon 2 slashes, that's this is the protocol, JDBC colon MySQL, that's the protocol part. Then you have to give the IP address or the host name right after that. So if I were to just, this is a made up story, let's say that there is a DB server hosted by Google in this form. So we'll write it in this way. Which database we want to connect to? That would be our student DB. So the host name goes here, the name of the server. And sometimes you don't know the name of the server. For example, the server that we're using in Lab 3, it doesn't have a name. It does have an IP address though. So instead of this made up thing, dbserver.google.com, what we will write in here is this host name, right? But if you type in host name like this is not going to work because this is a fixed literal thing. And again, student DB, instead of this, we are going to write DB name, okay? But the value should come from this host name. The value should come from this DB name. How do we do that? You use string concatenation in this form. Is this thing clear? That we are creating a new string which will start with JDBC colon MySQL colon 2 slashes. Then the host name value will come from here. Then we'll put a slash and the DB name will come from here. So if you change it over here, that would also get updated. Is this whole thing clear to you? Okay. Just to make sure that we got it right, let me print this out. Yeah, it looks okay. Okay, it's printed right over here. So far what we have done, we haven't done anything really. I mean, it's just setting up the parameters. What's your username, what's your password, what's the host name, database name, and based on that, we have created this database viewer. So now we need to establish a connection. Now we need to send out data to write to the database or do something like this. Is it clear till this point? Now, understanding all these things is quite important for two things. First of all, we got our final exams coming up, the theory final exams. Some of the questions will be based on database, obviously, because this is a new topic we are covering after the midterm. And also, for the lab exam, there will be some tasks related to databases. I'll give you options, definitely. What are the things you can pick from? Database will be one of those, and what I've seen in my past experience for the last few years, that many students pick this database thing, and for one reason or another, they find it easier to understand. So anyway, I'll show you all these things over here, but it's very important to try them out at home also. It serves you for both those things, for both the exams, you get preparation for that. So now, before we move any further, what we need to do though is we need to get something external. See, we're trying to communicate with a MySQL database server, right? It could have been an Oracle database server. It could have been a Microsoft SQL server. There can be many different things. So how does your Java program know which particular way to talk to? One of these things we already did. We wrote JDBC colon MySQL. So that's a clue right here that I'm talking to a MySQL database. But this information itself is not enough. Okay. I'm going to give you a totally different example, but maybe that will make sense. See, when you have your computer, you can set up Windows or Linux or whatever operating system you have. Let's say you buy some extra peripheral devices. Let's say you buy a new printer and you attach to your PC, or you buy an external hard drive or a DSLR camera and you attach that to your computer through the data queue. And what's going to happen? The first thing, maybe it happens behind the scene, but you should know that there is some extra software that gets installed. You need to have that installed. What's that called? Driver. For every hardware that you attach to your system, your operating system needs to know how to talk to that. I'm talking about very basic stuff, and maybe that will make sense that in your computer fundamentals course, maybe you learned that printers, there can be many different forms of printers. We can have laser jet, we can have bubble jet, we can have inkjet printers. They all use totally different technology to print. So at the hardware level, they're different. Okay? Your computer needs to send instruction to them to print, and they're actually working in different ways. So how do they still work with the same operating system? The driver is the gel. The driver takes the instruction from the operating system and sends it to the actual hardware. So for every piece of hardware you need that. And the reason I'm talking about this thing, you can consider the database management systems like external hardwares that you attach to your Java code. So your Java code doesn't really know how to talk to individual database management system. And that's where those drivers will come into play. The drivers will tell your Java code exactly what to send, what to get done, and everything in between. So when we go back to the project view, this is where you have to do something that you haven't done before. You have to go to the libraries and add a library. Okay. This is where NetBeans has a lot of libraries available. If you're using a different ID, maybe you'd have to do things in a different way. So if you come down over here in this list, you'd see that MySQL JDBC driver is already provided within NetBeans. If it were not provided within NetBeans, we'd have to download this file and then link to it individually. There are many other pieces of software that Java can work with, and for that, if you go into advanced stuff, you'd see that you have to install libraries like this. For example, one fun task would be that you want to write a Java program that works with your webcam. That you have your computer running over here, you have a webcam attached, and it will be continuously taking a picture of your room, so that whenever someone comes in, you have a recording or you have information about who came in at what time. You have all those things. It's actually easy to write a program like that in Java. Or I mean, maybe it's not for an intrusion detection. You want to write a program that works like Skype or Viber. You want to do it in Java. So, yeah, we can do that. But your Java program cannot talk to your webcam directly. There has to be some other software that does it for you. And that's the driver thing. That's the library thing. So for that you have, like, for webcam access and other image related stuff, we have something called OpenCV. That's a different story. It's not about this course. But over here, since we're dealing with databases, we need to know what database we're talking with, and we need a driver file for that. So NetBeans made life easier for us. It has given us the library. We just need to click on this thing and just say add library. Okay, I'm going to go through the same thing one more time, or many different times if you need me. Just go into the projects, whatever project you're on, there will be a section for library. Right click on it, go for add library, and then for this particular task, go for MySQL JDBC driver. Okay, is this thing clear? So we add this thing, okay? And now if you expand that, you'd see that MySQL JDBC driver is a part of this project now within the libraries. Okay, so this is where the fun stuff starts, that we need to connect to the database. And the way we connect to the database is we use a class called driver manager. Okay, and then you get a connection by passing the URL, the username, and the password. And that's the reason we have all these things defined over here. Just so we could call this method driver manager dot get connection. And also notice, what do we get back? Connection, right? So let us pass them. We need to pass the DB URL and the username and the password. And this is what I like about NetBeans. It's actually pretty smart. It understands just by looking at the name of the variables that you declare, what are the things you need to pass as parameters. Sometimes it gets it wrong, but you can fix that by yourself. So we are going to get a connection as return. Okay. Now there are a lot of problems right now. Like we have java.sql.driver manager imported already. That's why it's not complaining over here. But this is actually complaining about connection. It doesn't know what a connection is. The solution to that, as with many other things we have noticed before, we need to import, right? And NetBeans gives you hint what to import. So we can import com.mysql.jdbc.connection. We can also import java.sql.connection. And there are many other packages that have a class called connection. Connection is a very common term. Okay. So which one to use? You really need to know that. So just over here, you're not going to take the first option. You're going to take java.sql.connection. Otherwise, the stuff that I'm showing you over here, they're not going to work. So the import line is quite important. Everything that we're importing right now, they're going to come from java.sql package, not com.mysql.jdbc package. All right, so now that we have java.sql.connection imported, see the error is gone, and we still have some error. But if you take your mouse pointer over here, it says unreported exception, SQL exception, must be caught or declared to be thrown. This is not really unfamiliar to us. We have seen something similar when we were reading from files. When you try to read from file, there has to be a try-catch block for file not found exception, and also for IO exception. We had to put them in place. And this is one is very important. Say, I'm giving you the host name, the username, and password. Is there any guarantee that I have typed out the correct information? Maybe I have typed out the password wrong. Can I connect to the database? No. What if I typed out the host name wrong? Can I connect? No. What if I have typed everything right? Does it mean that I can connect? No. What if the cable is cut or the computer is shut down? So there are many different things that can go wrong, and you as programmer have to catch that and make alternate arrangements. So we're going to try to do this, right, as we have done before. But we will catch something called SQL exception. What are we going to do when we catch this SQL exception? Well, for now, not so much. I'm just going to report the error. Okay. It's not a good practice, but I'm going to take the cheap route right now to test this out. Ideally, you should give specific information, whether the username is wrong or the password is wrong or the host name cannot be reached. You have to be specific about it, otherwise your user is going to get confused. This is a very confusing message right here. Some error happened. What error? I don't know. All right. So let us try this out. What do we see? Build successful. Do we see any error messages here? And that means that probably we have been able to connect to the database. What if I type in the password wrong? So let us just test this out. So it says some error happened, Java SQL exception, access denied for this thing. Is this thing clear? Okay. So assuming that we have provided the right information, we won't get any error. We won't get any messages either because we haven't provided any. It's always a good practice for this sort of things that you should give some feedback. Okay, and maybe even before trying, Okay, so I'm telling the user that I'm connecting to the database, and if that is okay, it says connection okay, all right? If it is not, then I will get an error message. That's how the user will have some clue as to what's happening. And if you're doing it on graphical user interface, that's also very much possible. In most applications, you'd find a status bar. In the status bar, you'd give some status. What's actually happening? The user has to know. Okay, so we haven't done a great deal. This is just the connection, right? We haven't inserted any data. We haven't retrieved any data. But is this thing clear till this point? Okay, so just to remind you guys, how do we insert data over here? We write insert into, then what? Table name. The database, you do that ahead of time. You say use studentdb, like so. All right. Over here, we didn't do use studentdb. Why not? Because this is a part of the DB URL. The database, Java already knows which database to work with. That's why you don't have to say use studentdb. But the next part, insert into table name, right? Insert into studentdb, then what? Values. And then you start parentheses, then you pass the values in a comma separated list. So what are the things we need to pass? We need to pass the ID. Well, I don't have to be perfect over here. We have to pass a name, right? We have to give some address. I don't know, maybe something like that. And some phone number. Okay, all right. Okay. So we have some student record that we're trying to insert, and let me put that in one line if I can. That doesn't work. So studentdb doesn't exist, and that was my fault. Insert into table name, actually, not the database name. Now it works, right? If we say select star from student, you see that there is a new entry, this one right here. Is this clear? Okay. So this is the main part, right? We are executing a SQL command, and that inserts data in the database. So let me copy this thing. This is the query. This is what we know as query. And within that query, we can change new values. Let's say I'm going to change the name over here. Right? And we can change the other stuff as well. So this is a query that we want to send out to our database, and maybe this gets inserted over there. So how do we do that? Because we could do it from the terminal, from the console itself. Now we are trying to do the same thing, but from Java. Okay. And maybe you can imagine where we are going with this, that we will build a graphical user interface. We will take these values, the ID, the name, the address, and the phone number. We will take those from these text fields, and then we will make this query string, and then we will execute that from a Java end. It will go to the database. That's the actual connection. But right now we're not dealing with graphical user interface. This is still very much relatable. So how do we execute this query? This is where you need to create a statement first. Statements can execute queries. So let us create a statement object. You do so in this way, but again we have the same issue. Java doesn't know what a statement is. Okay, so we got to import that. And again, when you import statement, when you import this class, there are a lot of options. You pick the one with Java.SQL only, not the other ones. Okay. So how do we create this statement? We use the connection to create this statement. Connection dot create statement. Okay. Some of these things you got to remember. I mean, I'm not saying that memorize them. Like when you're writing a lot of code, you don't even have to look up anything. It will be in your head. So first of all, create the connection, then create the statement. And once you're done creating the statement, the next step is statement dot execute update. See, there are two things. One is execute query, the other one's execute update. If you're asking for information, if you're using the select queries, then this is execute query. You're asking for information. That will be a result. Okay. But if you are going to do insert query, you're actually changing the content of the database. That's why this has to be execute update. This is for reading. Execute queries for reading. Execute update is for writing. You're changing something in the database. So this is what we're doing, because this is our insert statement. And what are we trying to execute? See, this time NetBeans got it wrong. It passed the DB URL, but I'm supposed to pass the query. So if things go right, let us inform the user as well. System.out.println data or record inserted. Okay, and if it didn't get inserted, we will obviously come over here that there is some exception, whether there is an error in your SQL statement or whatever be it, it will come over here. So just so you know that I'm not doing any magic over here. We don't have any ongen.to right now. We run this code from our Java and it says record inserted. What is the validation? We got this guy over here. So we managed to insert it from Java into our database. Is this thing clear to you? The next obvious step is to do the other one as well. How do we retrieve data? We managed to insert data. We cannot get data from the database and print them in our Java code. Okay, so what I do over here, see, this is about insertion right now, and we have created this connection. We're done with everything. We should close this. This is always a good practice. I mentioned that with file input output, that once you're done with the resource, make sure you close that. Okay, it's always a good practice. Okay. So what I'd like to do here is I'll write two methods: private void insert data. This is an example. So I'm just going to take this code and put it over here. So if I were to call this thing, I'd just say insert data, right? And right now what I want to do is I want to call another one, public void retrieve or read data. Okay, so there will be two methods like so. Okay. So when you go back home, if you're going to execute this thing, comment out the one that you're not going to run and keep the other one. So how do we retrieve data? You need to understand that it's going to be very much similar. We have to go through the same thing. We have to connect to the database first, create the statement, run a query. It's the same drill, right? So a lot of this code will just be duplicated. So I'm going to steal my code, this whole thing, copy paste it down here, then make the changes. All right. So look at this thing. How do we read data from a table? Select star from table name, right? That gives us everything. If I want to be specific though, if I say that I want to know the ID and the address only, I could do so right over here. But I could also say select star, then I get everything. So depending on that, you customize your code. Let me keep things really very simple, and I'll just say select star from student. That's a very basic query. Okay. We got the statement. We are going to execute this, but this is not going to be an update query, right? This is a read operation, so we execute this. Now, if this works properly, we can say retrieved data. This data needs to be stored somewhere. And if you look at the execute query, let me look at the drop down, statement.execute. See, look at the option, execute queries down here. What does it return? Result set. See, when you run this query, you may get one row, you may get 0 rows, or you may get a bunch of rows. So it's a set of results. That's why it's named result set. So what do we do when you execute this query? You need to capture the answer. You create an object of result set, like so. Java doesn't know what a result set is. So what do we do? Yeah, thank you. So we import, and again from java.sql. So we have imported quite a few things from java.sql today, like the connection class, driver manager class, statement class, the result set, and finally the SQL exception. All these things, they're from java.sql. They're all from there. So once we get the result set, let us just try to print this out though. Can we do this? Okay. We are calling retrieve data. It says retrieve data, and then it gives us something cryptic, which is not really useful for us, right? I need to access each and every row individually. The way this works, you can't really do this. The way it works is you have to run a loop to get each and every record individually. See, we got 6 rows. First of all, we have to get here, get the information out, then we go to the next row, then we go to the next row, and so on. Is this idea clear? How do we do this? It is quite simple. You just say while result set dot next. Next returns a boolean. So if there are more records left, it will return true. But if there is no other record left, right? If you select the last record, right, After that, there is no next, so it has to stop. It returns false from there, and your loop breaks. Otherwise, it keeps on running. So while result set dot next, what do we do? Well, let me go and print out just an x, just to show you that we will get 6 such x's. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Why so? Because there are 6 entries, 6 rows. So we're going somewhere, right? But I don't need the x symbol. I want to know, for example, the ID or the name or the address. How do I write that? Easy stuff. Result set dot get string, because the ID is a string over here. If it were something else, then I would use that name. For example, get int or get double. What's the name of the column? ID. Did it work? Yeah, we get the ID. So let me get one of these things out at a time. So how do we get the ID? We write result set dot get string and then the name of the column. Okay, and just to show you that it can be a different name. So within this double quote, you have to give the name of the column. How do you know the name of the column? It's written right here. It's ID, address, or ID name, address, phone. All right, this is the name of the column. So you pass those over here, and this is where get followed by the data type. If it is a string, you say string. If it is an integer, you say integer. All right, just to show you that this indeed works, system.out.println the same data, whatever we have in our database, we're accessing them from our Java program. It's a simple console application, but you can at least pull the data right. If you guys understood this bit, we're going to just take this idea and implement that into a graphical user interface. Is this clear though? So in our next class, what I'll try to do is I'll do the interface design at home, and I'll bring that code because it probably saves some time. You know how to do that in FXML, so it's no big deal. And we will add these codes. Whatever we have written over here, this Java code, we will add into that Java FXML thing, and we can speed up the process. Okay. Any question about any of these things? This is quite important to understand, because for those of you who are planning to be a software engineer after you graduate, in most companies wherever you work, you have to work with databases, so you need to have a good grasp of this thing, how to communicate with those things, how to write programs. Okay.
What if we want to delete some data?
Well, okay, so this is some SQL command. You need to know those. And when you run this thing, this is simple. Delete from student, okay? So if you write that, all the records will be deleted. I don't want that. Maybe, okay? I want to, for example, delete this one where the address is XYZ, just to show you an example. Okay? So delete from student where address equal to XYZ. It's plain and simple, and you just hit that. It says one row got affected. Let us just check this thing out. Yeah, it worked. So this is not just about Java. You need to know these SQL queries as well. if you need, I mean, I just showed you how to insert data, how to retrieve data, but there's a lot more that you can do with databases. You can write complex queries, you can alter tables, you can update some of these values, not just delete that. Like we say that in database, you have 4 basic operations: create, read, update, and delete. We say that these are our CRUD operations. So when you go into your database course, you probably learn those things in more details. But for now, if you need to know the queries, I mean, just ask Google, or if you're here in class, ask me and I'll answer. Because I can't really cover everything over here, then this will be a database course. Anything else related to database or your Java code? Okay, all right. So I'll in today's class right here then, and in the next class we'll do the graphical user interface for this.